Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining me tonight. My name is Julie Sullivan, and I'm the environmental scientist with the Quincy Department of Natural Resources. And tonight I'll be giving you a brief overview of the Butler's Pond project and the benefits that it will provide to the Quincy community and the environment. So just to summarize, I will highlight the size of the pond's watershed and the pond's functionality during rainfall events, the project's background leading up to the pre-construction phase, the project logistics and timeline, and reasons why this project is beneficial to the environment and to the community. So let's start off with a quick overview of Butler's Pond and its surrounding watershed. For anyone unfamiliar with Butler's Pond, it's located a short walk from City Hall, and it's enclosed within Hancock Street, Butler, Marymount, and Marginal Roads. Butler's Pond serves as a drainage basin for a 34-acre sub-watershed. So every time it rains, the stormwater runoff from the surrounding 34-acre catchment area is conveyed to the pond via the existing storm drain infrastructure. So not only is the pond an important ecological asset, it is a crucial flood storage and stormwater retention asset as well. So I'd be remiss if I did not mention the hard work and dedication of the Friends of Butler's Pond, who have been working for over a decade to restore the pond in various capacities described in this slide. So at this point, I'm going to defer to Sheldon Benefit, Sheldon Benefit, not Sheldon. His name is Sheldon Bennett, and he's a friend of Butler's Pond, and he will speak a little bit more to some of the work that the group has been doing since 2009.
Okay, thank you, Julie. And again, I just want to welcome everyone for attending. And I just want to acknowledge some of my fellow board members of the Friends of Butler's Pond: John McConville, our president; Wendy Cheng, our treasurer; Joan and Mike Delaney and Jessica Cohn, are active members of the board also. And I see there's at least one of the Quincy Summer Youth Corps, Sachi Andrade, if I'm pronouncing her name correctly. And we look forward to working with them on their Butler's Pond documentary project. Just a couple of words by way of background. Prior to 2009, in the mid-2000s, we in the neighborhood were experiencing that the pond was seriously deteriorated. Was in seriously deteriorating condition. It was choked with Phragmites, reeds, and algae, and it smelled during the summer. So after a number of community meetings with the help of then Ward 5 Councilor Doug Goutreau, the Friends of Butler's Pond was founded. And our purpose was to work with the city and the community to build community support and otherwise help support the work of restoring and preserving the pond. And from the slide, you can see that our primary activity has been to secure community preservation committee grant funding and to work on building community involvement. We've been conducting biannual cleanups of the pond twice each year. And a major focus of our effort has been to successfully apply for community preservation funding. Over the course of the past 10 years or so, we've secured 5 grants totaling about $128,000, plus a few $1,000s of extra money from the Public Works Department. And for the purpose of first removing the Phragmites that were choking the pond, that was a big project, and then securing funding to conduct studies with professionals as to the water quality and to do studies of the sediment, its depth and toxicity. And all of this led to the conclusion that for the long-term preservation of the pond as a beautiful natural habitat, it was necessary to remove the sediment, the accumulated sediment that had been building up for decades, if not centuries, from the pond. And this called for a need for dredging the pond to remove that sediment. And so that's what brings us here tonight. And with further community preservation funding and working in partnership with the Department of Public Works, permits for the project were secured. That's a complicated business with state authorities and the local Quincy Conservation Commission. So the permits were secured and the engineering design and specifications were completed. And two other significant highlights were that supporting this Mayor Koch and his efforts with the City Council to establish the new Department of Natural Resources, which we strongly supported. And we were very pleased that establishing that department provided funding for bringing on David Murphy as commissioner and Julie Sullivan as environmental scientist. And with the staff, the department and the staff in place, the City Council in April of this year appropriated $1.4 million to move forward with the current project that you'll be learning more about this evening. And just finally, I just want to thank, on behalf of Friends of Butler's Pond, but the entire community, want to thank first Mayor Koch for his leadership and support, for his leadership in establishing the Department of Natural Resources and supporting our various grant funding applications and the current City Council appropriation. Thank City Councilors, current Councilors Chuck Phelan, actually, many years ago as a City Councilor for Ward 5, Chuck Phelan was instrumental in working for the donation of the pond from private ownership to the city for its long-term preservation. And Councilor Noel DeBona and prior City Councilor Doug Goudreau and Margaret LaForest. Also want to thank the Department of Public Works for their support. I invite everyone that's attending tonight to visit our website, butlerspond.org, and there you can learn about the pond, its history, its ecology, and also there are ways that you can help by donating to help our public outreach, which we do through public education outreach we do through social media, articles in the Sun, community meetings like tonight's. All this is being conducted by the Department of Natural Resources, for which we're very grateful. And we've also published newsletters in the past, and we maintain our website. So I think with that, again, I want to thank Julie for her very able expertise in project management. And she will now explain the rest of the project.
Thank you, Sheldon. And I can't thank you guys enough for all the work that you've done to get it to this point. And I definitely second all of the thanks that you mentioned with regard to Mayor Koch, City Council, and all the folks who gave us the money to move on to this next phase here. Just skip on to the next slide. So basically all of the work that Sheldon just described allowed the city to move forward with the full restoration of the pond. So dredging to restore the pond's natural depth is a necessary step because over the years, stormwater runoff has contributed to an abundance of sediments in the pond. These sediments are rich with nutrients, specifically nitrogen and phosphorus, making it an accelerant for aquatic plant growth, namely algae. And if you've been by recently, you'll see not so much algae, but a little bit of weeds coming back along the edges. So this is also kind of a factor in that. So as the algae and aquatic weed population explodes, oxygen availability in the water column plummets, and the pond's ecosystem sways out of balance. And the pond will be dredged hydraulically. So basically, in comparison to mechanical dredging, hydraulic dredging is pretty low impact and it will minimize any disturbances to the wildlife in the pond. And in addition to that, volunteers from the New England Herpetological Society are assisting the city with relocation of the pond's turtles to the New England Wildlife Center prior to project commencement to further ensure the protection of the pond's wildlife. I know that came up during our last community meeting, and that was a huge point of concern, and I totally agree. The turtles are part of what makes the pond so special, so I'm glad that we kind of have a plan in place for them now. Originally, our plan was to keep them in the pond and notify New England Wildlife Center if one of them were harmed, but this New England Herpetological Society just kind of came out of the woodwork, applied for a full-on permit from Division of Fish and Wildlife, and now we're able to kind of take it this next step further, and I'm really excited for that. And in addition to the dredging, a gravel wetland will be constructed at the Butler Road end of the pond. So this will allow additional area for stormwater runoff infiltration, and it will decrease the amount of sediment being discharged to the pond following the dredging. And I'm very pleased to announce that this project has been awarded to Luciano's Excavation of Taunton. And following our initial communications and meetings on this project, I'm confident that they'll do a fabulous job and they will complete the project on schedule. So just to give you a visual, even though this is kind of in plan form, so those of you who have not seen many plans before, this might look a little weird, but this is a plan reflecting the existing conditions at the pond. And this is what the pond will look like while undergoing the dredging process. So an access ramp will be erected on the western bank of the pond, and geotubes will be laid out along Marginal Road. The geotubes will be temporarily along the side of the road as the sediment dewaters and the water flows back to the pond. And here's a detail of the gravel wetlands. So the water will flow from a discharge point connected to the adjacent catch basin through the wetland and into the pond. The middle chamber of the wetland will infiltrate any stormwater pollutants before the water is discharged to the pond. So like I mentioned, the water will be in geotubes along the side of the road. So once the water drains from the geotubes, the sediment will be transported to an offsite parking lot to be mixed with a drying agent and prepared for disposal. So for those of you who have been kind of following this project all along, our original plan was to just kind of dewater everything on the side of the road. But after meeting with the contractor, they mentioned that, having that kind of offsite additional dewatering process actually speeds up the project quite a bit. So I'm excited that we'll be able to accommodate for that, and that'll be kind of a piece of the dewatering picture instead of just leaving everything out on the side of the road. And there will be a slight odor associated with some of this material. So that just means that extra step will kind of, get the material offsite quicker and just get this project done a lot more smoothly. So I know that this has been a long awaited moment, so I'm happy to finally present the project timeline. It is, again, a bit longer than kind of the estimate we had in the beginning of 4 to 6 weeks, but I'm confident that this will happen on schedule, maybe even a little bit faster. So to begin, we're going to trap the turtles starting August 19th. So the volunteers, like I said, from the New England Herpetological Society will set turtle traps in the ponds so that the turtles can be relocated to the New England Wildlife Center prior to the beginning of the dredging. The traps will be baited with sardine cans, and the turtles will not be harmed during this process. And the city and Friends of Butler's Pond will be hosting a turtle education event for all who are interested on Saturday, August 21st. So the time's TBD on that, but definitely put it on your calendar if you're interested in joining us. The contractors will then mobilize on site beginning on August 27th. Mobilization will include the installation of erosion controls, an anti-tracking pad, and the dewatering area. The dredging will begin on September 8th and will be completed on or before December 8th. The dewatering process will require a couple of weeks beyond the completion of the dredging. Once dredging is complete, the wetland will be installed. The contractor will work with the city to determine which trees will need to be removed to make way for the wetland, because there are a couple of, actually you might have noticed, already dead trees kind of down in that area. So the tree removal will be minimal, but I think it'll make a huge difference in that regard. And then finally, the wetland will be planted. So by planted, there will be some plants that are inserted into the wetland to kind of mimic the ecology of a natural wetland, and that will be taking place in March 2022, at which time the site will be fully restored prior to demobilization, and the project will be fully complete in April 2022. So an important point to note if you live near the pond are the work hours. The work hours for this project are 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. And the contractor assured us that weekend work will not be necessary unless the project is running far behind schedule. So in that case, the city has given the contractor authorization to perform work from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. on the weekends. But as I mentioned, that will be very infrequent and possibly not even necessary. Also, a portion of marginal road will be closed to allow for the necessary on-site dewatering area. This will not interfere with vehicle access to the residents on Marginal Road and the apartment building at 1022 Hancock Street, so no worries there. So again, if you've been following this project, you may have already kind of seen this piece of the presentation, but I can't reiterate it enough. There are so many ecological and community benefits with what we're doing here. So as I mentioned earlier, the sediment in the pond is super nutrient rich, and it creates an excess of aquatic plant growth, and it harms the pond's ecosystem. So eutrophication is what it's called, is a process that occurs when excessive richness of nutrients in a waterway causes a dense growth of plant life and the resulting death of animal life from lack of oxygen. So according to data collected by our project engineer, ESS, in 2013, Butler's Pond is in an advanced state of eutrophication. Aside from the nutrients, there are other pollutants of concern that are bound to the sediment particles in the pond. These pollutants include heavy metals like arsenic, cadmium, chromium, lead, nickel, and zinc. And they also contain volatile organic compounds and polynuclear aromatic hydrocarbons, which are generally derived from fossil fuels and air pollution. And exposure to these over time is really, really harmful for your health. So this will be pretty good for the people living around the pond as well. Following the dredging process, the pond's wildlife will rebound over time since there will be more available oxygen for the aquatic creatures. And as these aquatic creatures return, the pond's food web will return as fish will feed on insects and aquatic plants, and birds will feed on the fish. So the pond's restored depth will inhibit invasive weed growth, and the gravel wetland will prevent excessive sediment flow to the pond in the future, which will just make it a heck of a lot more healthy. The pond will lose its value rather as a stormwater management asset if it fills to the brim with sediment. So when the sediment is removed, the function of the pond as a catchment area will be enhanced, and it will provide greater flood control for its surrounding subwatershed area. Finally, it's important to highlight the numerous community benefits that a place like Butler's Pond provides. The pond serves as an open-air natural science laboratory that can be used as a tool to teach community members about the value of pond ecosystems and the plants and animals that make their home there. This winter provided several opportunities for local kids to play ice hockey and skate on the pond, and recreational opportunities like fishing and bird watching will become more available following the pond's restoration. The availability of a natural retreat like Butler's Pond, especially within an urban landscape, has been scientifically linked to a variety of mental health benefits. Studies have shown that time spent in urban environments can place stress on the nervous system and the amygdala, the part of our brain that perceives fearful and threatening stimuli. Spending time in nature is a proven antidote to this effect. Healthy natural resources also serve to increase property values in neighborhoods proximal to their location. So all in all, this is going to be a fantastic project, and I'm ecstatic that it's finally getting started. And so I just wanted to close out this presentation to just show some photos that highlight the natural beauty of Butler's Pond, and all of these photos are courtesy of Wendy Cheng, who is a friend of Butler's Pond. This is an aerial from last fall that shows a lot of the nice foliage that happens around the pond during the fall. This is from last winter when it actually got cold enough for the pond to freeze over and some kids to enjoy it for ice skating and ice hockey. And this is one of the pond's little residents, a nice turtle. And I'm sure if you've spent any time down by the pond, especially when it's sunny outside, you've probably seen one of these fellas, or maybe this exact fella right here. But lots of turtles call this pond home, and I'm sure they'll be very happy to return once it's all cleaned out and dredged. So with that kind of wraps up the project summary. I'd like to open it up to questions now, and I put my contact info on the screen. So if you'd like to reach out after the presentation, please feel free to do so. And thank you for listening.
I have a question.
Okay.
But I think you might have just answered it.
Sure.
Those turtles are going to be brought back?
Yes, most definitely. So I was talking with some staff from the New England Wildlife Center, and they said that they would like to return the turtles to the pond to overwinter, which would happen sometime in late October. And as I also alluded to, there's a possibility that the dredging might go a little bit quicker than we expect. So, if anything, when the turtles are returned to the pond in late October, there will at least be a good section of the pond that we can kind of put them in and make sure that, they kind of stay out of harm's way. But I think this will be a really cool, nice thing that's happening, because this is a totally volunteer based thing. And the New England Wildlife Center has been awesome, saying they'll rehabilitate all the turtles that they receive if they're injured or sick or anything. So the turtles are definitely in good hands.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I had a couple of questions. So
Sure.
do they have any estimate of or sense of the noise that might be associated with this? Because September to December is kind of a long time frame. And I was just wondering about the noise that might be around. And the other question I had was, we've talked about the turtles, but I think there are other critters that inhabit the pond. I'm wondering about them as they get displaced out of the pond because of this and the effect on the neighborhood, like mice or other critters that might inhabit the pond.
Sure. That's definitely a valid concern. And I can say, I can't promise no noise whatsoever, but my understanding is that with the equipment on site, there will be kind of a moderate level of noise associated with the work. And we had kind of a discussion about the work hours that would make it so that it would be not too disturbing for the neighbors around the pond. I realize 7 a.m. is pretty early, but definitely limiting the work to weekdays if there is any kind of noise associated with it. And then the second question about the wildlife stuff, we were originally planning on having the contractor notify New England Wildlife Center in the event of injured wildlife. So that includes things beyond turtles. That said, I've been to the pond a number of times, and I've only ever seen like kind of tadpoles and other maybe like random fish swimming around. So our hope is that if it's a fish and it can swim, we'll be able to move out of the way by the time the dredge is kind of in that area of the pond. So I think it's kind of the turtles that, that effort kind of came about organically, and that was totally volunteer led, and we're grateful for that. But the other wildlife in the pond hopefully will be able to swim out of the way. And if worse comes to worse, we have the New England Wildlife Center on deck if anything's really injured.
Yeah, I was more worried about, mice getting out of the pond and that are inhabiting the surrounding areas, and they tend to go into residents if they get displaced. Mice, rats, and that kind of displating, like getting into the neighborhoods. They will find places to go. So into the houses and around the neighborhood. More than like tadpoles and stuff. I think they will find a place to go.
Yeah,
so.
That's definitely, I totally get what you're saying on that. And please, I encourage you to reach out to me if that does happen. Mice are annoying. And I remember living in an apartment complex once that was being renovated while I was living inside of it. And we didn't have a mice problem. And then all of a sudden we did have a mice problem. So I totally get how frustrating that might be if it occurs. But my hope is that since most of this work is happening in the pond, that it won't really disturb the surrounding areas. But I definitely encourage you to reach out to me directly if you notice something like this happening as a result of the project.
Yeah, and there's a lot of bunnies that we've noticed in the neighborhood too. So in and around the pond this year. So and they'll probably just take off, I would imagine. So and the other question I had was, you said there is going to be, some smell and stuff. Is there a concern about domestic animals, cats? There's a bunch of cats around the neighborhood, and there's a lot of dogs in the neighborhood. Is there any concern with, the effect on them with this project?
I wouldn't be too concerned about that, just because all of the sediment will be contained on site. So if anything, like they can walk around the geotubes and be totally fine. If it's smelly, that's just kind of a a result of the organic matter in the
Okay.
sediment. So if anything, that's pretty harmless material in and of itself, but also the stuff is going to be inside the tubes. So the cats and dogs won't even be able to get at it. So I don't think that'll be an issue at all.
Okay, great, thanks.
You're welcome. I see a hand raised. Jess, if you'd like to ask your question. I'm all
Hi.
ears.
Thank you. Hopefully, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, I just had a few questions, and I apologize, I haven't seen like the latest plans, but are there plantings being considered like on top of the modified rock fill area and the gravel wetland? I'm assuming the way that the plantings will go in those areas is that they'll kind of blend naturally with the current landscape. It's not going to look like you're like a, another stormwater feature that I assume that was just something on my mind was what that would look like in the end. Because it would be nice if that could just blend naturally into the pond landscape and not look like a stark kind of infrastructure rock feature. And then I just had another question was about the shoreline and any of the like upland transitional areas, if there was any plantings or seed mixes being considered for some of the slopes alongside the pond, or really only for areas that may see disturbance during construction.
Sure. So those are both very good questions. And so basically this kind of brings me back to the first time I did a walkthrough of the wetland piece with the project engineer. And he was kind of explaining to me everything. And I've read the specs a bunch of times, which I can also send you. And basically the intent of the wetland area is that we're going to only put really like wetland plants in there. And we're going to get them all from this wetland plant nursery that's out in Amherst, I believe. So the project engineer, he basically told me, yeah, if this is done right, then you're not even going to be able to tell that the project took place. So that's kind of what I have in my mind. And I am a little bit well versed in kind of like wetland plant type stuff. So I'll be able to kind of put a stop to it if I see them putting anything ridiculous in there. And also kind of, be able to tell them, hey, like, we don't want this to just look like a giant rock field. So I think with the project team that we have, I feel pretty confident that it's going to look like a natural wetland at the end. And I already just like lost my train of thought on your second question. Can you just kind of briefly remind me of that?
That's okay. So my second question is kind of, I don't know if these are in the plans. I don't think they are, but since there is such a large restoration project ongoing in the pond, I wasn't sure if you did mention some of the dead trees being removed, but I was wondering if there would be any like plant removal or restoration on the slopes near the shoreline of the pond, or if given the fact that the city is embarking and spending money currently and has, contractors involved, is that something that could even be considered like the shoreline edges around the pond at all?
Okay. Gotcha. Thank you for reminding me. I'm just I thought so hard about the first one that the second one just disappeared.
No, I said it in a different way this time because I wasn't necessarily being very clear the first time. So thanks for your patience.
No worries. So yeah, that's not, as you mentioned, in the plan, but I definitely, if any of that kind of like side area that's not in the plans is torn up at all, I would like to plant something there for erosion control at the very least. And I know personally that you have a background in that kind of stuff, so we could probably converse on it. I really want to make sure that this is like done to completion. So if there is a need to kind of add some shoreline plantings to make the shoreline a little bit more secure, I'd be happy to do that because we will have a little bit of leftover funding from our original appropriation on this project.
Nice. Yeah, thanks so much.
You're welcome. I see another hand raised.
That's me, I think. Hi, Julie. I'm curious. I saw on the schedule the dredging is laid out to be 3 months, and that's probably neither contractual or something like that. But I'm curious if the contractor gave you sort of an optimistic sense of how long they realistically might think it might take.
Yes, so that's something was kind of discussed outside of the official schedule that I received from the contractor. But basically, the methodology that I mentioned earlier of them kind of moving the stuff off site and drying it in kind of a parking lot-esque location with a drying agent, that could reduce the dredging and dewatering process down to as little as 2 months. So we're kind of working with that 2 to 3 month window. And of course, with environmental projects like these, a lot of that's weather dependent and other factors that are kind of beyond our control. I think that kind of 2 to 3 month window, I feel pretty comfortable with that. Granted, it's kind of going into the winter beyond what I expected, but I think that they'll probably do a really good job in expediting this process if they have the ability to. Of
Great, thank you.
course. Well, I think that just about wraps up this meeting. And once again, I thank you all so much for joining me. I am so excited for this project, and I hope you are too. And I hope that the rest of you have a great evening.